Welcome to Changing the Perception of Blindness, one conversation at a time, where we aim to break down barriers, demystify blindness, and promote real and lasting change. Join host David Steinmetz as he connects us with professionals who are making a positive impact in the community. These leaders help empower individuals who are blind or have other disabilities to live a full and inclusive life. Let's lean in as David kicks off today's conversation.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Changing the Perception of Blindness, one conversation at a time. I'm really excited for our show today. We're going to have a great conversation here with Steve and Amanda. But before we kick it off, I want to thank Arizona Industries for the Blind, an enterprise nonprofit organization here in Phoenix, for being my sponsor for this show and for the last several years. AIB really focuses on creating a diverse and inclusive workspace that empowers people who are blind and visually impaired. And I find it really kind of amazing that more organizations really don't think about, when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, they're not really including people with disabilities. And, I try and tell people about how important it is from a culture perspective or from a community perspective, bringing all different insights and so forth. But yet we still see a really high number of unemployment among people who are blind or have other disabilities. And it's interesting that when companies that do embrace disability employment, they see not just the cultural improvements, but they also see a financial improvement, which includes the increase in revenue of about 160% in revenue, double the economic impact that they have. And it's just amazing that even from the financial aspect, we still struggle. So it's a win-win situation. And as we're celebrating National Disability Employment Awareness Month, I encourage all employers, hiring managers, anybody that has the opportunity to have an interaction with a person with the disabilities and have just a conversation, because that's what it really takes, is that opportunity to become aware. And I think my guests here today are really, in terms of lack of knowledge, right, is typically where our perception comes from, our backgrounds and our history, what our families knew, what they taught us, what society or religion has taught us, etc., helps form our perception. And when you are faced with learning something new or embracing something new or learning, is how you bounce that against what those family values and perceptions are. And the more that you have those opportunities to engage, the better off I think you are, the society is, and it kind of breaks those stereotypes. And especially, I can imagine, Amanda, in your industry of autonomous vehicles, the perception about safety or many different aspects, people don't understand the technology, so they say, well, I'm never going to do that. I did it myself with a smartphone. I need a button to push because I won't be able to find my way around on the screen. I'll never move to a smartphone that has just a flat screen. And it wasn't until I embraced the technology, and then technology was there and I embraced it, that I switched. And I'm like, what took me so long to do that? And so these opportunities, one conversation time, one opportunity to learn, that helps us grow and become a better society, I believe. So let's get into our conversations. I have Amanda Ventura, who's here with me today. She is the public affairs manager from Waymo, and she works with a very diverse group, right? Amanda, you want to talk a little bit about what you do with Waymo?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having us on the show today. My job in particular is to bring Waymo to the communities where we operate and the community to Waymo. So what that means is that we're working with a huge array of partners, like you mentioned, from accessibility advocates to safety advocates to people who really care about mobility equity too. So all of the different societal benefits that autonomous vehicles can have is what my team is focused on communicating to people. Conversely, we also bring the community to our UX researchers, user experience researchers, people on our product team. And so when you're talking about perception, I mean, that is a huge part of my role. That's a huge part of what our partnerships are based around, with different accessibility organizations.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And we have also with us in the studio, Mr. Steve Tepper. He is the executive director at Arizona Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired. Steve has been in the nonprofit industry for 30 years. He started when he was probably 10 years old and has been going strong ever since, working in areas where there's underserved population and helping to improve our community. And Steve, I'm sure your current role at ACBVI, you've noticed and probably have a lot of experience in terms of people's perception, and not just maybe from the employer side or the societal side, but even on the individual person who is blind in terms of their perceptions of what blindness is.
So, David, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. This is always a great way to end the week. At ACBVI, we serve annually 300 adults a year who lose their vision through accident or illness. We teach them independent skills and then help them get back to work. I think at the beginning of most of our clients' journeys, there is an unbelievable amount of trauma. Losing your vision is a trauma in and of itself, and the way you lost your vision may be an additional trauma on top of it. And then there is no understanding of how complete your life can be after you receive this training. And so what is really amazing to watch as I walk through the hallways is to see our clients going from being really unbelievably petrified and scared, and understandably so, and starting to walk this journey, both literally and metaphorically, where they open up and they start to see all the possibilities. And where you really see it is the job goals in the beginning start with, I just want to be able to get employed. I just want to be able to sort something. And then as they progress through their journey, they start to understand they're capable of more, and in some cases more than before they lost their vision. And so their job goals really expand to become these enormous goals that they didn't even realize they were capable of. And we partner with these clients and help them achieve it. There's housing, there's food, there's medical, and there's transportation. And without all of those being taken care of, there is no opportunity for success. So I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation today.
Great, thank you. And you were touching on the area where I was going to go next, right? Is for people with disabilities, in particular, when we talk about unemployment and a high number of people who are blind or with other disabilities that are not employed, there's several factors. Access to digital information, whether or print information as well, right? You can walk into a meeting and your manager hands you a piece of paper. To me, that's just a blank sheet of paper. That's not going to help me engage in the conversation. We can go to a website to book a trip somewhere, and I can't access the buttons or the fields that I need to be able to book a flight to just everyday tasks that you want to do. Additionally, you mentioned transportation, right? Access to safe, reliable transportation, which I think a lot of our conversation is going to talk about today, is how do we get around that and what impact that has on the success, not just for people with disabilities, but for everybody, right? And the third and most important to me and why I'm doing what I'm doing is the perception and how we overcome those stereotypes, perceptions of abilities, productivity, and things like that. So I think that we're going to have I know we're going to have a great show in terms of talking about how transportation impacts people's lives and whether it's with a disability or not. And man, you worked a lot with disability advocacy groups and accessibility groups. When we talk about transportation in those groups, what is it that you're hearing from them?
Yeah, what I'm hearing is that there are a lot of gaps in available transportation options for people who want to get around, or they don't always feel safe using existing mobility options. So a lot of my conversations with advocates begin with just listening to their lived experience, understanding how they currently get around, and then talking to them about what Waymo is. So for those of you who are listening and don't know, Waymo is an autonomous vehicle company. We operate a ride-hailing service where you can hail a ride via an app, and an empty car comes and picks you up and takes you where you need to go. You don't need a driver's license. You sit in the back seat, the front passenger seat, and you get where you need to go safely with a vehicle that is outfitted with so much hardware and sensors and software that is made to operate a vehicle without any kind of human intervention. And then when I start talking to people about what that opportunity means to them, a lot of people who maybe weren't born blind but went blind later in life, or have low vision, or know that they're going to have blindness later in life, they're thinking about how this could just create independence for them. One of the groups I work with is the Blinded Veterans Association. And for a lot of them, they're battle blinded. You had mentioned trauma earlier, Stephen. Something like Waymo being available to them very soon, so they could get that sense of independence. They can be alone in a car again for the first time in years. They don't have to negotiate with their guide dog. I mean, there are so many things that come up. If I just start talking, I'm going to talk forever because, David, I mean, this is a very real thing that I think you and I have even talked about.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I met your guide dog, Rufus, as I was coming in. And I mean, service denial is one of the biggest issues that I hear about. And I mean, with a Waymo, we don't care who you are, where you're going, if you have a guide or service animal. We just want to get you there safely. And I think that that's been like it's almost like one of the easiest things to for the disability and accessibility community to rally around in a lot of ways, because we have put so much thought and effort into building this product with everyone's input from the ground level. So for years, we've been working with advocacy groups like National Federation of the Blind, American Council of the Blind, local advocates, even here in Phoenix, Arizona. And so, I mean, the stories that we hear are just, they run a gamut.
Sure, absolutely. And the independence part you were talking about is critical. When I had to give up driving, that was the biggest thing, is how am I going to live my life? I can't drive. And I hear that all the time from the rideshare drivers. Oh, I couldn't survive. I couldn't drive. And so having the ability to have that freedom, and as you said, being in the car alone, and that that creates that sense of independence. And I know for Steve, your clients, using whether it's paratransit or other forms of transportation, it's a barrier in terms of being able to obtain the services that they're going to need to be successful.
I think at the end of the day, reliable transportation is almost an unalienable right. You cannot successfully have a job if you're scheduled to start at 9, you wake up at 5, your ride is supposed to arrive at 5:30, and instead it arrives at 9 when you're supposed to be at work, and you have no control over it, and you have no ability to pay for a different kind of service. And so for our clients, they oftentimes are caught between a rock and a hard place. They desperately want to work, but they aren't able to make it go. The person who works the front desk at our agency, everyone who works at the front desk at our agency is blind or visually impaired. They are supposed to be at work at 6:45. They show up anywhere from 5 a.m. to 10, and it's completely out of their control. Right. And so we have a system in place at our particular place of employment to make sure that we're able to cover for that. But that is not realistic in every workplace. And it's not something that makes for people to be able to have the employment that they deserve and have earned.
Right. And I think those things also contribute to some of the fears that employers may have, is, this person's not going to show up, or this or that. And it's a real fear. We see it all the time at AIB, that you're right. I've done everything in my power to get there in time. I scheduled my ride 2 hours prior to the time that I actually have to be at work. I'm either going to be there 2 hours early, or I have an opportunity to, chance that I'm going to be late. Um, and that once you get there, the stress of all that prior to just getting to work impacts your productivity, impacts your, your emotional state as well, and definitely impacts work in terms of that. And having that safe, reliable, for even those that don't have a disability, having the opportunity, like with Waymo, um, my future daughter-in-law had to go to a doctor's appointment. She didn't feel comfortable getting into a rideshare vehicle with another person that she didn't know. And so that's a great opportunity that if I got into a car that is safe, not just from the technology aspect, but I feel safe and comfortable, then I'm more likely to use it or do it. You
One
think?
of
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was gonna say that's another thing that we hear a lot, but I have spoken in particular to young women who are blind who have said, when they get into these cars, sometimes it's like 21 questions. How blind are you?
Hmm.
How long have you been blind? Can you see me doing this? Or, and sometimes people they don't understand. They mean well, but they don't understand kind of what those questions are actually doing to the person they're asking, which is what hinges on how I answer this question.
Hmm.
And I mean, I feel like women in particular, they're kind of raised to that's supposed to like kind of get your spidey senses going.
Hmm.
But I mean, add on the additional lived experience of being blind, and I mean that is kind of a terrifying,
Yeah.
place to be.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, just wanted to share a story that I had heard from someone because I think that is a really good point.
Hmm.
And I mean, this isn't even gender based. You could just be anyone who,
Sure.
feels vulnerable when they're around someone who
Hmm.
they don't know and, you can't trust from the get go. Um, and again, I mean, like, if you want to sing your heart out, you can't do that with a stranger either. So just another little point
Well,
for
you can,
Waymo.
by the way, you can.
Yes.
Might look a little different, but you can. I mean, I would add, my oldest daughter has a lot of health issues and is severely medically compromised. Um, she's 21 years old. The only way she is able to get around is Waymo. And it's a life changer for her. The ability that at 21 years old, she isn't trapped in our home is amazing for her. So I can't commend you guys enough for what was both a technological feat, right? To make an autonomous driving car, there is an unbelievable amount of technology involved in that.
Hmm.
But also you have gone out to each of these communities. My daughter found out about Waymo, may have been you, may have been somebody else on your staff, because they came and visited a group that she's a part of, and help them understand what was available to them. And I think it's a bilateral effort, right? The technology is one piece, but the making it available and accessible is something else.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's really touching, and I know that is going to make a lot of Waymonauts who hear this also very touched.
God, we need a fun name. We're not ACBVI knots. We got to figure that out.
You'll come up with it. You got a very creative mind and
Not
creative
today.
team. Not today, but it will be there. And oftentimes companies are trying to solve a problem, whether it's disability, blindness related, or a product that is out there. They want to revolutionize the world, and it usually comes from something they saw or whatever else. When you don't get that input from your customer or the end user, you really end up missing out on golden opportunities to create that product that's going to be universal for everybody. And we see that with technology and whether it's an app or computer or whatever it is if you don't think about how the community that you're trying to serve is going to use this product, you don't get the input from them that says, if you put that button there, I'm never going to find it, right? Or you don't tell me that there's a button there, I'll never find it. So what it's Waymo or what Steve you're doing at ACBVI is bring that awareness, engaging with the community from both sides of your user experience to get the input to continue to evolve. And where do you see, whether it's in terms of transportation and going from where Waymo is now to other areas that autonomous vehicles, or even, Steve, with your organization and how we're getting people to work, what maybe some of those barriers are and what, we're going towards.
So I mean, I can jump in first, but I'm not the expert. What I would say is that access and cost are the two largest barriers when you're looking at transportation. It is access to transportation, right? If you think about, if you're using Dial-A-Ride, how much time you sit either at home or at work or wherever you are waiting for that ride, that is either early or late, but rarely on time. It is an unbelievable amount of time that you lose from your life. And that's access. And the other piece is cost. The reason that Dial-A-Ride is so prevalent is that the cost is subsidized. And it really, in terms of dollars and cents, really works. We have to get to a place as a society where we're understanding a reimbursement model, so that, and excuse me if I don't say it correctly, the Waymonauts are able to, get this technology working in many other facets. We're seeing the absolute ground floor of this, and to me, it's stunning. I took a ride with my daughter when it first came out, and the Waymo that we took was very geographically limited in the beginning. It was, you could barely go anywhere, and I wanted to ride with her to make sure that it was going to be okay, because I might be overprotective a little, a smidge. And the technology is otherworldly, but what we're seeing today that I think of as like Jetsons, like really is the very, very beginning of this. This is the equivalent of when, I had my Radio Shack TRS 80 computer that had less functionality than the watch that I wear. And it will only get better. As that happens, how is government and other agencies working to make sure that that intersects so that it's accessible to all of our population? Waymo is a company. They deserve to be reimbursed for what they're doing. They were pioneers. And at this stage, it really becomes a question of where's that intersectionality? When is it happening that Dial-A-Ride is autonomous? And it's not taking large groups of people and picking them up, in a 30-mile radius. So you can be 3 miles from where you need to go, but be on your Dial-A-Ride for 2 hours. When is it going to become, point of sale almost, where it goes and picks you up and brings you to where you need to go and then goes and grabs somebody else? And the technology, it's right there.
Yeah, that on-demand service is so key. I mean, it doesn't matter what city I'm going to, I'm hearing about paratransit, gaps that people really wish they didn't have to deal with, but they do have jobs, they do have lives, they do have appointments, they want to go to brunch. And so I do think, as we grow and expand, that helps. Like the geographic expansion does help with accessibility. But it's also about those partnerships. And so we have done some research here in Arizona, actually, with Ride Choice, which is kind of like Dial-A-Ride's sister, and
Distant cousin.
Okay. Okay. And what we did find over like a 6-month study that was actually funded by the Federal Transit Authority and published in partnership with Arizona State was that within 6 months, people who had used Ride Choice historically didn't want Waymo to go away because it was also subsidized at, I believe, is a $5 fee, which is what people pay for Ride Choice. So, I mean, there is research out there that we hope will inform, future programs that can be launched in major cities. And, we're working on some low income subsidized rides, more like discounted rides here in Metro Phoenix, as well as San Francisco, for some more research that'll be coming out soon. So excited to share that, with the community, because I hope that that helps everyone advocate for, more accessible rides when it comes to a price point.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I mean, there are so many people who are paying so much money for other rideshare options that don't feel as safe.
Mm-hmm.
I actually had spoken to, I don't know if you're familiar with First Place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so First Place, we had talked to some of the young adults who have neurodivergent diagnoses, and one of the young women worked at Harkins, and her parents had instructed her to just continue to hail a vehicle until you get a female driver. And so she was eating like a $5-6 cancellation fee
Mm-hmm.
every time. And, that kind of fear, that kind of lost cost shouldn't be the status quo. Like, we shouldn't
Right.
accept that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just building off of that. But I hope that some of the research we're doing does start to affect change.
Right.
And there's even nonprofits that are like, we will fundraise just to get, ride
Mm-hmm.
cost
Mm-hmm.
covered for, the people that come and get our services. So, I mean, people are starting to think about what they can do. I just don't think all the onus is on the nonprofit either. So,
Right. I agree. It's hard for an organization to, whether it's an employer, to say that public transportation or ride sharing or so forth to cover that. One is a reasonable accommodation, or two, to allow that person to come in 2 hours late if beyond their control, right? Is those are very difficult questions that organizations get faced with every day when we're using public transportation, whether it's fixed route or paratransit, and not just the disability community, right? Lots of people use it because of many different reasons to use public transportation. And if you're on a fixed route, it takes me 2 hours to get to work from Chandler into
wow.
kind of the west side of Phoenix. That's a lot of time spent waiting for buses and transferring and so forth. Um, and so to have the expectation that I can go from door to door at a reasonable cost that I can do. What is my price point and my time sitting on the bus and so forth, right? Is to make that kind of return and on that investment. Um, to say that this is a viable means of transportation. And there are other companies, as you mentioned, whether the rideshare and other uh, s- organizations that are trying to provide services in that paratransit space that is more of a one-on-one ride versus that shared ride where
Mhm.
you get picked up at your place of employment and you go west instead of east to get home, and you spend those 2 hours that Steve was mentioning, because it is frustrating. It shouldn't be, and unfortunately, it's kind of an accepted norm. I hear people all the time, it's, why have you not called and said, "Where's my ride?" and demand some answers. Well, it's a shared ride. It's dial ride or whatever.
Oh, David, I just want to interrupt. Dial a Ride's policy is you can't call till your ride is 30 minutes late.
Mhm.
They won't even tell you what
Right.
your estimated time is until your ride
Absolutely.
is 30 minutes late. That's
Yeah.
insane.
Right. It is difficult, and it has to take government. It has to take the transportation industry and the consumers to work together to help solve some of these issues. And the cost is a big factor of it. Steve, as you mentioned, that price point, right? Is access to it and then costs. And new technology and things like that are expensive but as it grows, it lowers the cost. But can it be subsidized? And sounds like you're saying, Amanda, that there are opportunities in looking at studies that can this be a form of paratransit, a viable solution for paratransit.
I mean, yeah, and in the meantime, we're creating, more bespoke, subsidized by Waymo opportunities with different nonprofit agencies. So there are a couple organizations where Foundation for Senior Living would be a good example of one, where we gave them X number of, free rides that could be given to
Mhm.
seniors who are deemed low income. so that they can get to a grocery store and back instead of walking to the nearest supermarket for, the week's food. And so there are partnerships like that where, we're getting useful feedback from individuals who are riding with us, but it's on a pretty small scale. And, even though the learnings are helpful, I think it's more of those formalized studies that'll be really useful for moving the needle. But I mean, I have some examples of even just regular riders in the community that are paying full price for, their rides and using a screen reader. And like, we don't always get it right, but this is where I think, having an accessible product and then having also a good system for hearing feedback and making changes and improvements, because we're still kind of a baby company in a lot of ways. Like we're growing, we're in a lot of cities, but we still like need that feedback to do better. And so one example is there is a screen within the app where to continue your ride, you would swipe up on your app screen. But the way that a screen reader would work is you double tap to continue your ride. But then the screen text said scroll up to finish your ride, or like to continue your ride. And so we were getting feedback from people using screen readers saying, hey, I'm like, it says scroll up, it's not working. And we're like, oh, the screen reader the screen says one thing, but the action is completely different. And so that was something where, our team, we do our best, but then we're like, oh my gosh, that one fell through the cracks. And so having users with that real lived experience has been also really, really helpful for us being like, okay, got to fix this bug real quick in the app. Sorry, I feel like I digressed there, but that was one where I was just like, I was trying to think of, just even some of the small changes that, before we're fully out there. It's like Phoenician writers have been so awesome. We call ourselves Phoenicians, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Phoenician knots.
Phoenician knots. Okay, I'll work on a cool nickname for your team.
So, Steve, in terms of transportation and options, are you working with your clients in terms of how they plan and train on that technology, and then work with employers on the reality of transportation for your clients as they go out into the job market?
David, you've given us entirely too much credit. And I feel great for that question. No, we are not working with employers on that. Very honestly, we're engaged in a different battle with our clients. We certainly work on how to use the rideshare technology, and that's part of the assistive technology that we teach. But we have not had any conversations within employers about that. And that's something that certainly, hopefully, down the road, but not as of yet.
Okay. But you do provide some training to like ADA type training to the public?
Oh, we definitely do, but not around transportation. And to be really honest, the majority of the ADA training that we end up providing to the public is the result of a settlement with the Attorney General's Office Civil Rights Division. It is not proactive. Now, we do some of that for state employees, specifically state employees who work in vocational rehab. That's part of their onboarding. But transportation is I want to be open. Transportation is not a part of that at this stage. But we do definitively, as part of our assistive technology, teach how do you use all of the ride sharing apps.
Awesome. So we're getting close to wrapping up here today. We had a great conversation about transportation, how it impacts people's lives with and without disabilities, because it is a viable, autonomous vehicles are a viable resource for the community and for people who need to get around that don't drive or choose not to drive. And so these conversations are important because it brings, again, I'm going to go back to the beginning of our conversation, is it brings the awareness. It takes away some of the stigma of things that are unknown to a large group of people. Blindness is a low prevalence disability. So your interaction with someone who's blind is probably very little, if at all, or it was something you saw on TV. And usually not a positive experience. So we're here today to bring awareness and positive change to our community. Amanda, if our community wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, they can go to waymo.com and we have a feedback or contact form. That's definitely the best way because our team can then sort out, how to reach us. You can also find me on Twitter. I'm at Mandaven, so pretty easy. Or you can just at Waymo and it'll find me as well.
Awesome, thank you. And Steve, should people decide to seek you out, how would they find you?
www.acbvi.org, or email is info@acbvi.org. I'm not on any form of social media whatsoever and feel like a real winner for that.
Okay, so we're getting you an account on Twitter.
Steve Knott.
I'm not sure that my kids are going to be okay with that.
I love Steve Knott. That's a good nickname.
I would
That's
take
solid.
that.
All right. Well, again, thank you both for being here, having the conversation, and through these conversations, we're changing that perception and really helping redefine that with the right training, the right technology, and the right attitude, people who are blind are successful in the workplace and are competing. And so please continue to listen in and hear from our valued and respected guests on how they're making a difference in the community. So thank you.
Thank you for listening to Changing the Perception of Blindness, one conversation at a time, with your host, David Steinmetz. Be sure to subscribe to Changing the Perception of Blindness, one conversation at a time, on your favorite podcast platform. And tune in live on Phoenix Business Radio X every third Friday at 9 a.m. We hope you feel inspired by today's conversation, and maybe we've even sparked a new idea or opportunity.